you're an immigrant yourself, or if you're a child of immigrants, you experienced or directly were modeled people betting on themselves in search for a better future.
Hola, hola. Welcome to Entre Tías y Amiguis, the podcast where we dive into the wild roller coaster ride of adulting. I'm your host, Adri, a queer Salvadorian native, a first-gen trailblazer, and licensed psychotherapist, here to share wisdom, stories, and real talk with my tías and amiguis to inspire and uplift our community. I want to remind you that while I am a licensed psychotherapist, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Now let's dive into today's conversation and explore the journey of adulting together. Grab your cafecito, get comfy, and let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Entre Tías y Amiguis. I am so excited to have here a dear friend and also someone that I've been following along in my own journey as a therapist who is creating content, who is online, who is talking about first-gen issues. Like there's so many layers that I see myself reflected with you, Lisette. And so to have this podcast opportunity to interview you and to hear more directly from you, such a pleasure. And I'm really excited. I know that our community is going to get a lot from this conversation. And to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I always encourage folks to share about some of those identities that are important to them, particularly in this stage of life. Like, how did you get to this place in life? And what are some of those identities that frame today's conversation?
Thank you so much. I know we've been connected online for a while now. I've had you come on lives with me. And so it's such an honor to be a guest here with you on your podcast. And so I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for that space. When I say it's an honor, truly, it's an honor to be here to witness your journey, witness your growth, and get to be a part of that together. I am, totally says, I'm a licensed psychologist in terms of the hats. Let me just start with the hats that I wear now, and then let's connect the dots. So I'm a licensed psychologist. I am a public speaker, and I am a writer. Those are the main three hats that I wear. And beneath those hats, there's a lot of other roles, but those are the professional hats. The personal hats that I wear in my life at this time is, I am still the eldest daughter of hardworking immigrants from Mexico and El Salvador. I am an elder sister. I have one younger brother. I am a spouse. I've been married now for a year and a half. So a spouse. I am a cat mom. My cat is very special to me, so I will always own that. I am also a plant parent. I love my plantitas. I love my gatitos, and I love reading. And so sometimes I'll identify as a bookworm. I was the kid who, when the punishment for me as a child was to take my book away, like no more reading. like what? I remember telling my mom, "You're so lucky that's what I'm getting in trouble for," because I didn't want to put my book down. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. Like I mentioned, my parents are immigrants from Mexico and El Salvador. My dad grew up in a small town of Aguascalientes called Tepesala, but they moved to a border town of Tecate when he was a young boy. So growing up for me, my trips to Mexico were to the border. It was a 3-hour drive. And so I remember telling my friends I went to Mexico over the weekend. I was like, I was in Mexico. And they're like, no, that's impossible. How could you be there in just like one weekend? Because their experiences were about going and spending time in parts of Mexico that were much further away. Both my parents went to the US as teenagers. And my mom came from El Salvador, and I actually visited El Salvador for the first time last summer. And that was very special.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My mom had taken me there as a newborn, but I don't remember anything from that time of my life. And so it was really special to go there with her. It was her first time going back, in 30 plus years, 35 years or so. It was really special, but I won't go into that. I just want to share these pieces of me because my heritage is really important to me. It informs really the work that I do, how I show up in the world, and how I used to see myself and how I see myself now. Also, all are informed by that, and we'll speak to that as we speak more to why I do the work that I do. And I think something that comes up a lot with sharing my origin stories is sharing when did I decide that I wanted to be a psychologist. That's really important to me because I knew from a very young age that I wanted to do this. my earliest memory of telling someone that I want to be a psychologist, specific a psychologist. I was like, I want to be a psychologist. Was when I was 13 years old. I know, I was little. I was like, not many people know when they're that age, this is what they want to do. And I told my teacher, I told her, like, I want to be a psychologist when I grow up.
How did you know at 13 what a psychologist was?
I had experienced getting help from a psychologist already. I had, when I was very little, when I first started school, I had separation anxiety from my mom. And so my mom would drop me off at preschool. I'd grab onto her leg and cry. And so I was afraid of being abandoned deeply. And so my parents, like, desesperado, they're like, what do we do? The teacher said, take her to this person. They'll help her, right? A parent, despite stigma, despite anything else, parents will do what they need to for their children. And so my parents took me to see the psychologist. And I don't remember anything about that experience. I was so little. But I remember, like, I guess I shouldn't say anything. I remember going to the office. But what I remember was learning there is a job out there where people help people navigate challenging times in their life. And as I got older, I understood not just that there's a role that can do this, I also understood the power of someone who looked like me pursuing this kind of degree. Because I understood, wow, we don't talk about mental health. Like, eso no se habla en esta casa, right? We are not even with each other. No, and if we talk about it, it's los nervios, stomach aches, the other physical symptoms we feel, but we don't really touch on the emotional parts of it. And so I think as I grew awareness, I think we need more representation. And this is already something that I'm passionate about. Why not be the representation that I'm seeking to help challenge the stigma? Because the stigma is there because we just don't understand it. And we're not going to understand something for as long as that space feels intimidating. Right. Yeah. And so you, me, all of us mental health providers in the field who are coming in with these diverse backgrounds, we're changing the perception of mental health, not just to others, but also even in the learning systems. We're challenging the traditional teachings that they have by introducing new ways of thinking about mental health that are, decolonizing how we do therapy, but almost like reintegrating to our traditional healing methods to form this beautiful, what I refer to this as, just this beautiful combination of the two, of what is Western in terms of focusing on the mental healing, and then the indigenous or more holistic healing services around our traditions, which brings me to the aquí, allá.
I mean, that's exactly where my mind was going. So this season, I've been asking folks just to for the framing of the conversation, what if you could choose, what are you going to name your episode, right? And I think that it gives a beautiful opportunity to think about how are we going to frame this. And you said when you sent yours, I was like, oh, this is going to be a conversation that I want to have because I very similarly, indifferent to you, know the experience of being the both de aquí y de allá, right? For you as a little kid, you're very attuned and very aware that there's this other world across the border that you can access with 3-hour drive that your friends are not experiencing, right? There's this awareness. Then there is the part of you're going to school and the traditional things that parents do is not helping. So vamos a agarrar ayuda de acá, right? What is the help that we can find here versus how we would have done it back home? And so this trajectory of your life, even in just your introduction, we can see how you have had to navigate this multiple worlds and the code switching, the cultural expectations, the family roles, all the things that are wrapped in that. For me, I came to the US as a teenager. And so as a 16-year-old, I had a pretty strong sense of self. I knew in the back of my mind that at some point I would come to the United States. That was what my parents had been talking about. A cierto punto, algún día vas a estar acá and everything. So I think a lot of us grow up with this knowledge that there's this other world that we belong to or that we will belong to. But when we're little, we're just kind of NA. It's we don't have words, and the adults are maybe not putting words into it because for them also it's just a regular experience to be from these two worlds and we're traveling across the border. And this is just good old life. Now we know it's what the heck? How did we do all those things and how have we navigated all of that? But in the moment that it's happening, you kind of just do it.
Yeah. In the moment that things happen, right? When you were saying, I thought of, we do it, but it's often framed as survival, right? Like, we're doing this to survive.
Yeah.
We're doing this because it's the only way out. And so sometimes we can lose the lessons that we're learning along the way because we're so focused on the survival part of it.
The utility, the survival, this is what everybody else around us is doing. This is nothing special. I know that for me, that has been like one of those like parts of kind of getting to now be like a señora and telling the story and being like, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then I watch people's faces and it's like, oh, wait, like those are not the experiences of everybody, especially when we've been in school and academic spaces with people that are not coming from backgrounds like us. Those were the first times that I kind of saw the big deer eyes, just like, what the heck? Like, what do you mean? Like, this happened to you, and then you immigrated, and then you came. And so it takes a while sometimes to recognize that what we're going through, the experience of everything, all the parts that we're living, just in itself, that beyond survival is resilience, is empowerment, is just so many beautiful things that kind of bring us to where we're at, right? And so I wanna ask you to kind of take us into the journey as a psychologist to focus on this first gen, the aquí, the allá experiences, is the like sin fronteras, right? How did you decide that not only were you going to be a psychologist, right? That you met a psychologist that worked in a school setting that helped for a very particular issue. And here you are as a psychologist making space, creating space to serve people like us. How did you kind of make that connection that was the focus of the work that you wanted to do?
I love this question because I think there's multiple touch points where I think of, I want to focus on first gens, but there were multiple times where I felt that, oh, is this the correct population to focus on? Is this where, when you're in school for a therapist or anything, you're trained as a generalist. You're trained to work with anyone. And then you graduate, and then you now have this choice that you've never had before. Like, who do you want to work with? And I was like, well, I want to work with my comunidad. That was always the goal. Like, I want it. And I actually worked in community mental health for a while where I served predominantly Spanish speaking populations. And then I found myself enjoying that, but finding that something was missing. So then I worked at a university counseling center. And I said, you know what? I want to focus on first gen college students. I remember when I was sitting in the room, this experience that I had that brought me back to my 18-year-old self. So I'm sitting with a college student ahead of me, and I am hearing the challenges that, they're experiencing, and they're the same challenges that I was experiencing at their age. Being, this person was a first gen Latinx identified. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, wow, like the patterns are continuing to repeat over and over again. And there has to be something we can do to change that. There has to be something we can do. And what I've learned about how change happens is change happens when people become aware that we need to focus in on a certain population, on a certain challenge, whatever it is. And so, and that's the moment where I'm like, I can't just stand by and just witness when it's something that I'm so passionate about, which is the change in how we view ourselves as first gens. Like, I don't know about you, but I think something about being the eldest daughter, the eldest sibling, where I'm like, I went through this challenge so that you didn't have to go through this challenge. It's what I think of for my brother or my cousins, which is a whole different conversation about the unnecessary pressure that I placed on myself with that. But
yeah.
I think in the moment of hearing the student, and I thought, okay, we need more resources. We need to change that. And I think that I wasn't the only person having that thought in that moment at that time, because around the time is when first gen resource centers started to pop up. But when I first labeled myself as the first gen psychologist on Instagram, I remember how big of a commitment that felt for me in the moment, because I hadn't seen a lot of mental health providers speaking directly to serving. I think we were indirectly saying we serve and we work with first gens, but not as many people were directly saying that. When I told someone that I was going to specialize on first gens, they told me that I should choose another specialty because I would make no money working with first gen.
I wish that I didn't relate to that comment, but I think probably many folks in here, not only other psychologists or therapists, but we have heard that about us to us while we're also here doing exactly the same thing that we're being told can't happen. It's very frustrating. And also like a little fire. I know for me, it's just like every time that you tell me I can't, that's exactly what I'm going to do. But the frustration of not finding the importance of creating the space for other first gens has been detrimental to a lot of people, has impacted their mental health. And for others of us has also been the same motivation, right? So I hear you in that.
Yeah, yeah. And so, there's so many layers to it,
Uh-huh.
but I think at the core was just witnessing these patterns repeating and saying, this is the population I want to work with. This is who I want to support. And sometimes there's guilt, right? Because I could work with a lot of other people and you have this pressure that, at least, like I said, I experienced, and I think it's a eldest sibling, eldest daughter thing where I was a fixer for so long in my life, like the go-to person for things where I'm like, I'm a go-to, I can help with all of this. And so kind of holding space for, first gen professionals like need more support because there's not a lot of resources available the moment you graduate college. Here in college, people started the first gen resource centers, and I love seeing those. I love every time I get like a notification because I have first gen as a notification on my Google alerts. Every time I get a notification of like a new resource or first gens, new this, I'm like, yes, I love that there are people out there with the same passion and drive to help first gens, that they're creating these spaces. But most of the time, every time I see them, they're still first gen college students. Now, the resources that I do, and I guess you should clarify, are applicable to all first gens, but the population I had in mind were the first gen professionals, because that's where I saw the biggest gap. It's you graduate college and suddenly you're feeling like you're back at zero when it comes to navigating the world.
What makes me think about is that back in the day when I graduated from grad school in '09, right? So it feels like, even though it's only like 15 years or so, 16 years or so, it feels like a whole nother world, because back when I was in grad school or in undergrad, there was no resources. There were no first gen resource center. Like eventually as a Latinx grads, we didn't have Latinx grads back in the day, right? Like you just were one del montón. Like you were just like one of everybody. And I wish that I would have had the resources, or that somebody come and say, hey, wait, you're going through all these transitions. You are first gen. You don't have role models. You hit it. You did what you needed to do behind the scenes, and you came back as if nothing happened. And the ability to be here in this place of life now, where by no means are all the hardships and all the challenges all better, right? But there are definitely more resources and more people talking about this. Like that's exactly, similarly to you, the reason that I've started this podcast, because I know that it gets better. I know that it was hella hard. I know that I wasn't alone in it, because all my friends, we were going through the same thing. We were looking at each other like, you too, girl? Like, yes, me too, right? And I want just to make it a little bit easier for the next group of people that come, because now we have access to all these resources. And part of the commitment of like the community, but to myself, is also that reparative experience of like, ¿qué hubiera hecho yo? ¿Qué me hubiera dado yo si hubiera tenido la posibilidad de tener un adulto like me, right? Like, what would have I done if I would have had access to like a grown up like me, and I would have gone and say, hey, you're first gen too. Like, can you help me through the ropes? But it is like, I'm loving this generational change that we're seeing, where you're doing this work, where I'm doing this work, where we know so many amazing people that are doing the work. And also to be here taking the space, we also know la soledad, like the isolation, the loneliness, the nice of questioning yourself that we had to experience, and all of these things. And being first gen, if you're still struggling with them, it sucks. Validly. If it feels like it sucks, if it feels heavy, it's because it is. And also, we're here to tell you that there are resources, there are people like us that want to help, that want to give something back many times because we didn't have it, right? And so I'm just feel so lucky that we get to have this space to name both the difficulties, but also what we have now available.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 1000%, right? And so thinking about the generational shift, thinking about the resources people have available, I wish we had many of these before, but I'm grateful that they're available now.
Absolutely.
And I want you, as you were talking, something that came up for me is a conversation that I've had recently with people about how one small reframe. So a lot of my work now with first gens is reframing how we look back at the experiences we had and understand, pulling the lessons from it and sort of shifting just our thinking around it. So bear with me, I'm going to give you an example.
Go for it.
I'm gonna give you, and this is an example of some of my own aha moment as well within this, right? So I now view myself as a very confident person, but even just 5 years ago, I did not think of myself that way.
Mhm.
And actually, right before I launched my business, I met my now spouse, and I remember complaining about how overwhelmed and how stressed I was in my current workplace at the time. And he's the one who encouraged me. He's like, you should consider working for yourself. Why don't you consider a private practice? And he's like, you could always, those jobs, they're not going anywhere. If you need to go back to a job, you can, but you seem
Mhm.
very unhappy. Why don't you try this? I'm like, but I'm so scared. This is nerve wracking because, I just got licensed. I have debt from grad school. I have zero savings because I've just started working, and you don't make money as a postdoc, right? So I'm finally getting a paycheck, and I'm like, I just don't know that I could do this. I'm scared and I don't feel confident enough to take this kind of risk. And he looks at me and he's like, what are you talking about? You are the most confident person I know. And I'm like, what? Because I'm telling you, for me, the way I
Yeah.
viewed myself at that time, I was like, I'm not confident. I'm scared to ask for a raise. I'm scared
Mhm.
to use my voice in spaces. This is before I became a public speaker. This is before I started to understand the power of my voice, right? And I was like, I'm not. And then I sat there and I listened because he's like, it takes, the way he described it was, it takes confidence to go from 0 to 1. It's like, which is sort of the trajectory you've had to experience. And the way that I frame it now is like, it takes confidence to be the first. Yes, we may feel that we are doing it out of survival, right? And which is what you had talked about before. And we have no other choice. But in that moment, when your back was against the wall and you felt that you were running out of options, you chose to be courageous, to take a step into the unknown, in because you trusted and you had confidence that you would figure it out,
Mhm.
that you would be resourceful, that you would be adaptable, that you would lean into the skill sets that have helped you survive. But when we step into it as confidence, that's when we can separate the survival part and step into it, into our own, right? Into the embodiment
Mhm.
of the confidence that we've carried within us all of this
Mhm.
time.
I mean, absolutely, because I think what you're saying makes me think about the difference between keep going forward because you have no other choice, and now the place that we're in is like keep going because we're making the choice and because we're owning it and we have awareness about what the consequences are. Because I remember, when I was younger, it's just like you give me whatever, of course I'll do it. But was that confidence or more just like, pues ni modo que hago, right? Like and being able to differentiate that, yes, the same thing was happening, but now there is like a level of awareness and a level of choice of how that confidence comes across. I've done it 1,000 times. I have to remember that and remind my nervous system, like we've done scary things
Mhm.
1,000 times. We've done it. We've survived it. We've thrived. We've surprised ourselves. And now I'm purposely on purpose by my choice gonna jump into this very scary thing because I feel like for me that was the difference. Before I didn't think so much about the consequences. It was just like, pues ni modo, we go. And now making the choice, right, of believing the versions of ourselves that did it and trusting that we're exactly the same person. Now we just have a different set
Mhm.
of knowledge. That self-awareness that you talked about, right, is the best of both worlds because now the survival things that we learn are
Mhm.
now showing up in that choice that we make every day to do that hard thing. And that possibly many of the listeners of this conversation can relate to that. Every day you're waking up and making a choice, even if it feels like there's no other choice, the choice is that you keep going and that you keep showing up and that you keep doing it. But coming to that awareness, I know that for me, that was like the difference, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I share that because it's not like education that gets you that awareness. Sometimes it's the people in your circle, or the people that you're around, the messages you're telling yourself about yourself, right? And so I have my own therapist, and so I'm still going to therapy now. I think I will go in and out at different times in my life, but great endorsement for the work that we do. It's part of also what helps us reconnect
Yep.
with these pieces of ourselves to gain that full awareness of it. Because
Hmm.
throughout our life, and I love the way you share that, we get like snippets of it here and there. And it's not until we get full awareness that we're able to connect it all together and really form that full picture and understand ourselves. And there's always little pieces to add. That's why I'm still in therapy, because I love gaining more insights, learning more about myself, and having that support, that ongoing support system to get through that.
100%. What is making me think about is how many strengths go unacknowledged because of this survival is what you got to do what you just got to do, right? But maybe there is an opportunity for some of you from the lessons that we've learned that we weren't stopping to say, hey, that's amazing about me. I just did
Mhm,
that. Go me, right?
mhm.
I don't remember that I did that when I was younger to myself, right? I can look back and I'll be like, dang, like that girl, that 23-year-old, that 16-year-old,
Yeah.
that all those versions of me, whoa, the things that I was doing. But maybe for some of you now, as you're 23, as you're 17, as you're entering college, as you're entering the professional world, can you slow down to acknowledge that this first gen experiences, yes, comes with a lot of layers of difficulty and a lot of pain. And it's not a walk in the park that is always easy. And within that story, that reframe, right, there are so many gifts that are unacknowledged many times, right? And so, what are some of those like strengths and gifts that you've been able to kind of like bring onto yourself from this living in the in between world of being first gen, but also being connected to your homeland and your roots?
Okay. So that is a question for everyone, people listening
Yes.
and
What
me.
are the
So,
strengths?
so
Sit down, take a minute right
yeah,
here.
take a minute, reflect, because that's, as someone who is also specialized in the imposter phenomenon, I need you all to know your strengths. I need you to think about it. Think of it as bragging. I just have that moment. But I'm going to help you get that list started if you're first gen and you identify with any of this.
Yes.
So I would say, I think you've been naming a few throughout. So that resilience, the adaptability, the resourcefulness. One that I don't think we name enough is emotional intelligence that we develop. You have to learn, probably through parentification, but you have to learn how to read people pretty well, read situations, and make very quick decisions based on that. So that helps shape your emotional intelligence. Definitely helps shape mine, and I think it's part of what makes me really good at what I do.
Mhm.
And the belief that anything is possible, I think, is such a big strength that
Optimism,
we have.
hopefulness. Because I
The
think being an
optimism.
immigrant, being a child of
Yeah.
immigrants, being de aquí, de allá, being a therapist, psychologist, it's like a labor of hope because we
Mhm.
have to have the space to see beyond what is right in front of us. And that is a strength that I don't think we acknowledge that as first gens, we're going blindly many times onto the next step. And it's like the literal hope that it's going to get better, that this is worth something, that there is a reason bigger than you understand, right? And so hopefulness and vision are also strengths that come up for me as I hear you say that.
Yes, yes. Confidence. We talked about that a little bit. And it's just the ability to bet on yourself. Because if you're an immigrant yourself, or if you're a child of immigrants, you experience or directly were modeled people betting on themselves in search for a better future.
I literally, if you're not watching this video, I literally just like took the biggest gasp of air because that right there, Lisette, is we are betting on ourselves every day. We've seen people betting on themselves every day. What a beautiful thing to name. Thank you for naming that.
Yeah, that sounds like it's not the conventional wisdom that you think from traditional role models that people expect to have. But it's, my parents modeled the way that they could. And what I didn't speak to earlier is my parents did not have access to a proper education in the areas that they were living in. So my parents both have middle school educations.
Mhm.
My maternal grandmother never learned to read or write. And same with my maternal grandfather. My maternal grandmother also very limited education level. And so for me, I think it's especially important to take lessons from them, because in the society, we don't value people as much when you don't see all these degrees next to their name, or when you think of them as we think of education as what makes someone intelligent or capable, and it goes so much further beyond that. And I think so my biggest lesson, and I share this because it's I think sometimes people are like, well, I'm not smart enough because I don't have this degree, I don't have these accolades, I don't have all of this. You don't need these degrees to learn how to think critically or to challenge how other people experience the world. You just
Hmm.
need to put yourself out there and bet on yourself.
Hmm. Even survival in itself is a skill, right? It doesn't feel good when you're in the middle of it because you're just like running. But now there's a possibility that many of you are in the journey of understanding how to use your survival mechanisms to gently push you to that choice of just like, I'm going to keep doing scary things and I'm going to bet on myself. Because now, when we're not activating that survival because like necessity, but rather with intention, right? Even survival in itself leaves us with a set of skills of just like, I joke is like my toxic trait is that like if a plane was going down and they're like, can somebody fly it? I'll probably raise my hand and be like, give me the manual. I'll figure it out. Because
Yeah.
being first gen has set me up to figure out so many things. And it's probably one of my favorite things about me that also has come from a lot of very difficult times where it didn't feel super fun to have to figure it out. But there is the gift in that, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I'd say, quite honestly, most things in life that what we're learning from, like, I think most of it we learn through some kind of struggle, right? La lucha is la lucha for a reason because we're fighting for our lives, we're fighting for our lessons, we're fighting for, just these different words of wisdom that take a toll to get to.
Yeah.
But we get through it. And then it's about, again, fighting home back within yourself and recognizing, like, I actually now have all these skills. How can I bring them out into these spaces with intentionality?
How has your own healing journey? Because there is something also really interesting about being a therapist that is working with a lot of people that share those identities, right? Because there's been many times where I'm like, oh my gosh, like me too. And I'm not that far ahead. Sometimes I'm a little bit behind. And so I know my own healing journey as an individual, as a human in this planet is better because of these interactions that I have when I see people healing through some of the same things that I've healed through or that I'm healing through or some of the journeys that I've witnessed and the people that I love, right? So how has this work of being first gen and then now working with other first gens, professional first gens, people that are sort of in that similar fields or just like having the same life experiences, how has that helped you make sense of your own bicultural identity, of your own first gen identity, of like that de aquí y de allá to embrace it?
Yeah, I loved what you said there, though, Adri, when you said how working with people and being in the healing profession is healing of its own because we're hearing stories of people who are going through challenges we've experienced, challenges maybe we have yet to experience, and kind of navigating that alongside. And I think it's the biggest privilege to be able to have access to people's stories in such an intimate way. So I want to just share that I have that shared sentiment of like, I'm so honored every time I sit with someone, I hear their story because as much as I'm there to support them and help them grow, I'm
Mm-hmm.
inspired by every single person that I work with.
100%.
And, like people, you hear people have different boundaries around how they are in terms of with their client, but I'm like, I am current clients, past clients, whoever it is, like I think of them, they come to me in moments in my mind where it's like, I hope they're doing well. I hope they're continuing on this path. And so that's what I'm inspiring, on constantly inspiring even people I don't continue to work with because I know how much they're working and how hard they're working for what they want. So, but my own healing journey, I think having my own separate space for processing all of this is also very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important because it attunes to what is mine and what's not mine, right? And like
Yes.
separating that transference that can happen. But in terms of how it shapes my perspectives when it comes to the bicultural identities, I think we're always learning together around things. And when I say that, it's, for example, I find myself as part of our work as therapists, we always have to do continuing education. But
Mm-hmm.
I go beyond our like traditional continuing education because I find that learning from podcasts like this one is such a helpful resource. And I find myself connecting with my clients with these other sort of resources, whether it's a podcast, a YouTube episode, a social media channel, right? And connecting in that way so that we can both learn and grow our perspectives on certain identities that we have and expanding in that way and having that shared knowledge. So I find that is really helpful to continue. So, but my actual perspective on our bicultural identities is how different it can feel from individual to individual, but how universal the experience actually is of holding the two or multiple identities at once for anyone who's multicultural.
Where my mind goes is the moments in therapy where witnessing my clients do their own reframe, because we as therapists, right, we are holders of a certain type of knowledge, but by no means does that mean that we get it perfect, that we do it all the time. Sometimes I've experienced a moment of just like, dang, I just said that. It's like, I need to think that a little bit about for myself. And then the client comes back, right? Our patient comes back and they did the thing. And it's like, whoa, like, how amazing, right, to see and to witness and to encourage that growth in other people, but in ourselves. And then to go to my own therapist and say, this is an area that just came up because of this work that I'm doing with this client that has very similar vibes to what I have going on, that just helped me name something that I didn't even realize I hadn't named, right? Like I've had that happen to me, or I've had the moment of just like hope showing up and being like, man, how can we give up? Like, I can't give up. If they're not giving up, neither can I, right? Like in those moments when life gets hard. And so what a beautiful opportunity we have. And I guess I'm thinking about the baby therapists that are listening to this episode, or like the upcoming psychologists, the upcoming therapists, this immense pressure that you may be feeling about having it all together figured out, for all your healing to have happened, for you to know how to say and what to say the right thing. And the beautiful part of this work is that you get to continue to grow. This is one of those professions where you get to grow so much because of the work that you do to help. It's like the ultimate collectivistic, individualistic sort of cycle. I give myself something, I can give more to others, others give me, and then I grow because of it. And so it's just such a beautiful journey to have, you know, the opportunity to support other people who can relate to our experiences.
Absolutely. An absolute gift. An absolute gift. Yeah.
Okay, so we've been hyping it up. We've been talking about like, you'll make it. But there are some real challenges, right? Internalized oppression, internalized white supremacy, internalized capitalism. Talk to me about some of the work that you're doing with first-gen professionals that maybe have this identity. I've always been a good student. I don't make mistakes. I'm the reliable one in my family. And then here I am, and I feel like my boss hates me. Or I keep being given this assignment and I don't know how to figure it out and I'm afraid to ask for help, right? How does internalized oppression and the very many layers of it all, how does it show up in some of the work that maybe, if you feel comfortable, you have had to unpack, or that you witness other first-gen professionals having to unpack? Because oppression is real. And if it feels hard, it's not only because your own circumstance, but sometimes it's the environment is exactly made to keep us out. And so it makes it a little bit harder for us. So I would love to hear from you about this perspective of oppression. How does it show up for first-gen folks?
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about internalized oppression. And I'm going to just introduce a few terms here for folks listening. You're probably familiar with them. But one, I want people to be familiar with Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, just to understand if what I talk about is interesting to you, check out that book or just read like a quick summary of it so you can understand a little bit more about what internalized oppression is, how people experience it. But I'm going to also give a quick summary. Internalized oppression is when you start to believe these negative perceptions that other people may have of you. You start to believe that you are not capable. You start to believe that you are not deserving, that you are not enough, that you are not, that I'll pause there. You start believing you're just not enough. And you believe that for yourself, and you believe it for everyone else who holds the same identity as you. It's internal because you're believing it for yourself. So for me, I believed that Latinas, all first-gen Latinas, do not deserve to be in a C-level role at like a company. They shouldn't be CEOs. They shouldn't be this, whatever it might be. That's not my belief. But let's say that was because I don't feel like I'm good enough. And I believe that I'm not good enough. And I believe that women like me are not good enough. So that would be an internally oppressive thought, right? Where does that idea come from? It comes from external. information, right? That's reinforcing this internal idea. So external information, you go around and and the example I'm giving, I'm not seeing a lot of Latina women executives. And if I ever do stumble upon one, in this fictitious example, I try to be clear, in this fictitious example, if I stumbled upon one, I would read into how she's bad at her job, how she's not good at this. And that would just be a constant reinforcing cycle of not believing that this person is capable because I don't feel that I'm capable enough. Now, with pedagogy of the press, what comes in is that we need to develop critical consciousness. So begin to think about this critically and understand that thought that I've internalized, it's actually not my belief. It's a belief that has been ingrained in me for so long that I started to believe internally for myself as well. And so I, for so long, never saw someone in that position that I then decided that must mean that we're not capable and we're not enough. When I can think critically, I can recognize, actually, there's a reason there are not women at these roles and in these positions. They are not getting hired, right? Or if they are getting hired, they're not being promoted. And, and then understand it's all a systemic, it's perpetual systemic, like discrimination, racism, oppression that's keeping women from actually being in these roles. It is not that they're not capable, it's that people are actually creating barriers for women to not be in those roles. Now, when I've developed that critical consciousness and I can challenge, okay, wait a second, women can do this. We're just being stopped from doing this by these other external sources. Now I can feel more empowered to make a change. So what this looks like in often a lot of people with marginalized identities is something called the crab in the bucket mentality. You familiar with this?
We're going to pull each other down because you're kind of getting out of we're all down here. So if you're going up there, actually, no, that's not where you belong. You belong down here with us. And so we kind of create the barriers that the system has created and we replicate them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when we're in the oppressed mindset, not only do I not believe that the people can do it, I will actively help the system in stopping them from doing it. Yeah. I will actively help the system by exactly what you described. So this is because crabs, when they're in a bucket, some of them could get out, but they end up pulling each other back in, which is just not a great survival instinct, right? So for us, sometimes I will say it's not often always intentional. But sometimes we discourage people from following their dreams because we don't think that it's possible instead of supporting them and helping them up. So when you are thinking about this internalized oppression, how that impacts you, how that impacts your relationship, is think about how are you when someone comes and shares some exciting news for them? Do you immediately think, oh, I'm scared for them? How is this going to be? They're not going to make it. And it often comes from a place of caring. It can come from a place of, I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to be disappointed. I don't want you to fail. What you're actually doing is holding them back and reinforcing that crab in the bucket mentality of, you don't get to go up there if I'm not going because I'm scared. You should be scared too. We all need to be scared. So if you're that person, maybe begin to shift and think, what if everything worked out? Why can't I be someone that cheers for them and cheers for them winning and working out? So I would say that's what I need people to think about when I think of the internalized oppression. Begin to challenge where maybe you have some of these thoughts. We all have them. And again, it was something that you learned. Someone taught you this, whether it was overtly they taught you this or in other ways, but someone taught you this, and you need to be able to get into a space of recognizing what is actually your belief versus what someone told you should believe. For that, notice what you do. Are you the encouraging one or are you not the encouraging one? How can you begin to change that?
You just dropped some gems here. I mean, there's so many parts. My brain is like, which thread do I follow? Because there's so many things. But I want to bring it back actually to the second sort of area of expertise that I really follow you on, which is imposter syndrome, right? I often, back in my day, we didn't have no imposter syndrome. You sucked at it. You were just like, well, I sucked at it. I'm going to keep going. Now we have language to say am I not good enough? Am I, right? That imposter syndrome can also be tied into internalized oppression, right? Because when you start believing by all direct and indirect messages, right, that you're not good enough, then you actually get it out of the bucket. You're like, but do I belong outside the bucket? Because everybody else is in the bucket, right? And it's almost like thinking about your crab in the bucket. It's almost like a part of you, the imposter part, right? That feels like you're not good enough, that you don't belong here, that you are not qualified. Is your own crab pulling you back into the bucket and saying, nope, don't
Yeah.
get out, because when you get out, it is going to suck and it's going to be scary and it's going to be terrible. And so the internalized oppression is not only the system, right? But it's like the way that we also train this voice to keep us
Mhm.
safe, because it all comes from a level of risk appetite. Is it going to be safe enough to get out of this bucket? I can live with
Mhm.
how unsafe it is. But when imposter syndrome, or when like in imposter syndrome and internalized oppression kind of show up together, I like to tell
Mhm.
people, it's like, well, isn't that you really don't belong? Or is it that there is somebody else sitting at the table because the system hasn't made it okay for others to sit at the table? And so this discomfort that you feel is actually
Yeah.
natural, because your alert system, your safety system is saying, not safe, not safe, not safe, because nobody else is standing there to tell me that it's going to be okay and it's going to be safe. And so internalized oppression and imposter syndrome go hand in hand. And I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, no, they absolutely do. I trust me. I was like, and this connects to this. You gotta slow it down. So I'm like, I want to slow it down because I also know what it's like when I'm listening. I'm like, oh, I want to remember that, and I want to make note of that, and I need to track that. So I'm there with everyone. Imposter syndrome. So I want to start with challenging just a term, and I know I was going to do this, and so when the term was originally coined, which is in 1978, it was coined as imposter phenomenon. At some point, at some conference or at some event, one of the creators of this said syndrome. And then people heard syndrome and they ran with that term and it became what we are all familiar with as imposter syndrome. So, but language is important. Words matter. There's not a mental health professional out there that will now tell you how important the words we use are, how we
Mm-hmm.
talk to ourselves, how we think about ourselves, how we talk to others. So when we are saying syndrome, that automatically signaling to you is something to pathologize. There is something wrong with you. Say syndrome, there's something wrong with me. How convenient for a system that's creating all these problems to create a term that reinforces that emotion of you being an imposter and then makes you believe that you have the problem and you're the reason for experiencing this. So convenient for them. Now, phenomenon describes the experience that you are having. So when we refer to as imposter phenomenon, we're talking about an interaction that is happening, not a syndrome, not something wrong with you. You are responding, you are reacting to an environment that is perpetuating this experience of you not belonging, right? You walk into the room and you look around the room and you're the only person who looks like you. You look at the pictures, because I know a lot of companies do this. They do like their, employee of the month or their, CEOs or all that stuff. And no one on those walls looks like you. First signal that you feel different, right? You're like, oh, no one else is here. So then what happens? I'm the only one who looks like me. We start to feel the pressure to
Mm-hmm.
be the sole representative of everyone and who may look like us, because we want to make it easier for the next person who comes, right? Because we're community oriented. So it's not really coming from the self, but it's like, now I have to prove myself, not just prove myself, but prove for everyone else. So proving myself means being perfect. It might mean not asking for help, because if you ask for help, then people know that there's something wrong. It means doing it all by yourself. It means expecting so much of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
expecting you to have all of the knowledge, even on your first day of work. So because asking and or admitting that you don't know something is what will then reveal you as a fraud, right? Or it's expecting yourself to learn everything so quickly the first time that if you don't learn it the first time, you feel like a failure. So what I hope you're hearing from this, it turns into you now have unreasonably high expectations for yourself. And when you inevitably fail to meet these expectations of yourself, internally, you've decided that that is the evidence that you are a fraud, that you do not belong, rather than realizing that you placed these expectations because you entered a space and suddenly felt pressured to put that pressure on yourself. And there was no one there to tell you, and this is when we talked about the representation and having others there who can provide some of the guidance. There
Mm-hmm.
was no one there to tell you to say, it took me 6 months before I learned how to do this. And I had a lot of help. And I had people tell me multiple times how to do this. Or to say, like, this is you can take time off of work. If you take a day off, it's okay. You're not going to get fired. Like, no one's going to think less of you. There's no reward for perfect attendance in at this work. Or, like just no one to guide you and explain it's perfectly normal to feel a little bit doubt, to feel a little bit of afraid when you're doing something new for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with you needing to be a representative of your identities to
Yep.
everyone in that moment, but you feel it because you're reacting. So
Mm-hmm.
feel like a fraud and you're terrified of being found out. And one thing I'll add in my now long short summary is there's a lot of other impacts to your mental health. So I'm describing the behaviors that it can change, maybe the way
Mm-hmm.
you think about yourself, but it can lead to you experiencing anxiety, depression symptoms, stress, because you're chronically worried that someone is going to discover you. But honestly, the one symptom I would say of this that like frustrates me the most is underperformance. Because when you feel like you are not enough, when you feel like an imposter, you don't apply for that promotion, you don't apply for that scholarship, you select yourself out of these opportunities because you're constantly questioning your worth. So, in addition to this fear of other people you know, finding out you're a fraud or because of the fear. I'll say
Mm-hmm.
because of the fear you have of people find out you're a fraud, you limit yourself. And that is the most tragic thing about the imposter phenomenon for me.
Mm-hmm. It's heartbreaking because I can think the times that I've fallen into it, and I'm sure as business owners, as a psychologist, as a academic, as a speaker, as all the roles, I know that I've had moments where I have put limits on myself because of not seeing anybody else doing the same thing, right? And then I grew up kind of like you, being like that kid that read and that kid that was different, and so I always felt like, oh, no, it's just that's just very niche of me. Like that's just particular to me. Now I know there's heck of people that are doing the same things as me. That everybody's like both enjoying and struggling with the same things, right? But that imposter phenomenon, it does keep us small. It does keep us worried about the risk. And the thing about it is that taking risk is not a bad thing. And failing, not knowing, it's not a bad thing. You will fail many times. And guess what? You're gonna learn and you're gonna be fine. And maybe there'll be consequences, sometimes short term, sometimes long term. But consequences are just what happens after something happens, right? And they can be good
Mhm.
consequences, they can be bad consequences. But many times when we are believing, like drinking the juice of the imposter syndrome, you're not seeing it as internalized oppression or as a phenomenon, then we ourselves become, again, like the crowd, like pulling ourselves back into like, quédate en tu lugar, stay in place. And how do we challenge gently with a lot of compassion that you are going to be scared? It is okay to be scared. It doesn't make it any better. It doesn't feel any better. You're still going to be feeling scared, but will you be stopping yourself to do it because it feels uncomfortable? It doesn't feel really great, or nobody else is giving you the permission to do it, right? And so learning how to navigate that, being aware that there are very likely moments that you've experienced where you've limited yourself thinking that everybody else was limiting you, but it was something that was coming from you. And that can be hard to acknowledge that, when I have moments, it's like, dang, I still believe that. Like, oh, here we go again. I thought I had already worked through that, right? But that's the thing about the systemic issues, that they will keep showing up under different cloaks, over different shadows, creeping behind, like a little curtain of just like unsafe, bad things are coming. And it's like, no, feeling unsafe and being scared, you gotta be aware. Let your anxiety be your alert system. Hey, like pay attention, like prepare yourself, right? You want to show up at the best version of yourself. And if your best version of yourself still has gaps that are not there, it's not a bad reflection on you. And I think that's like the biggest part of hearing you, that I know for me has been life changing in my journey, is differentiating that being scared, being worried, being anxious does not mean that I'm incapable, that I'm not good enough, that I don't belong here, right? They are different. But when they're all together, they really get in the way of ourselves.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I hope folks listening, like, I hope that you sit down, reflect, take time to think about your own gifts, your own lessons, and maybe being really honest with yourself and recognize in what ways have I been limiting myself. Adri, I acknowledge some of hers. I know I have plenty of mine, like, why does that person get that and not me? Why? And then like, why am I focused on that? Like, I have to focus on myself, what I can do, how I can move forward with my dreams and not say, oh, I don't know that I should apply to that. I don't know if I qualify for this. I apply to everything now. And we talk about rejection. Rejection is expected. Failure is necessary when we talk about it. And I label my rejections as a not yet folder in my inbox now, because I'm like, honestly, these are just opportunities that it's not the time yet. If I still want them later, they're available, but it's just a not yet, not now.
Mm-hmm.
And that has helped the sting of rejection a little bit. But yeah, I have plenty of emails in that not yet folder.
And you have been really vulnerable at sharing about that process of being comfortable with naming, I too get rejected. I too make mistakes. I sometimes don't got it together. I still got to go to therapy to work on things that I didn't realize were still coming up for me, right? Being able to name that we, the tias, we're like a little bit on the older side now, giving wisdom. Like, who gave us permission to give wisdom? No, our life experiences have given us the permission to earn this wisdom, to share it, and also the humility, I think, to also know that there's still so much that we don't know, and the opportunity with that humility of like what's coming. So as we wrap up this interview, because we probably could talk about this, like ni siquiera vi que había pasado una hora. Like we're talking about this forever. The intersections of our personal lives and our professional lives into this topic is so rich and so beautiful. So follow our work because we talk about these things commonly. But I want to ask you, and I love taking everybody to this, like, what do you think the younger version of Doctora Lisette would be delighted to know happen? Like, I always used to want to have a radio show when I was little. That's something that coming with the podcast has been like a realization of like, I wanted to be like Loveline with Dr. Drew back in the day. And so here I am with like my own mic. And so what do you think little Doctora Lisette would be the most proud, the most amazed, the most excited to see about the life that you're living?
Yeah, honestly, Adri, when you ask that, I'm like, why am I so emotional? Like I feel that. I think that version of me is like, is here, right? And it's here. And I think what she would think, she'd be so proud. She'd be proud of us fulfilling the dream that we set out of being a psicóloga, right? She'd be so proud of that. And she would be in disbelief that this quiet, shy little girl with really big dreams is experiencing so many of these big dreams. And I think that would be it. She just would continue to see, I hope she can see the limitless possibilities that there really are. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that, because you are proud of yourself, and we are proud of you, and our world is better because we have Doctora Lisette here with us. What is the legacy that Tia Lisette is living in this world, knowing that her little self is super proud and enjoying and living it up, because this life could have never even been imagined, when we were little? What is a legacy that you hope to live as Tia Lisette, as a mentor, as a person that others look up to? We're sharing wisdom.
Yeah, I think honestly, what comes to mind for me is healing. It's a legacy of healing, trusting our journeys to get us there, destigmatizing mental health so that we can allow ourselves to heal. And I think the biggest one, and as a first-gen psychologist, I would say, is understanding that our multifaceted bicultural identity is a strength. And it is what has built bridges between us, our ancestors, our parents, our caregivers, whoever is in that lineage. And it's not a gap to be ashamed of, to feel that we have to bury, to feel that we have to change. And learning how to connect, again, going back to what I had said initially, which is connect back to those lessons we learned and fully embodying them now that they've come to our awareness, and embracing that, because we're just getting started.
Yes, we are just getting started. Thank you, Tia Lisette, for joining us here Entre Tías y Amiguis. If you're in the trenches with us, we see you. And if you learned a little bit something from hearing about our journeys, we welcome you. You're not alone, and we are here. Reach out to us on the show notes. There will be all the ways to get in touch with Doctora Lisette, but put your plug in. Where can people find you on Instagram before they got to go through the show notes?
the first Gen psychologist. Find me there on Instagram as the first Gen psychologist.
Literally. She's just calling it out. Like, that's who she is.
Yeah.
All right,
exactly.
y'all. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lisette, for joining us, for sharing your wisdom, your love. Loved having you here. And until next time, to our comunidad Entre Tías y Amiguis, till the next episode. Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your tías and amiguis. Your support helps us reach more people and continue these important conversations. And don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself, embrace your journey, and keep living life with heart, vision, and creativity.